The summer of 1974 brought warmth and quiet to the coastal town of Crystal Bay, Florida. It was the kind of place where the ocean breeze moved through palm trees like a lullaby, and the air smelled faintly of salt and sunscreen. Locals gathered for evening walks, fishermen cast their lines from wooden piers, and children played barefoot on the beach until dusk painted the water gold. Among the familiar faces in town was Anna Carver, a 25-year-old elementary school teacher, known for her gentle manner and kind smile. She had recently moved to Crystal Bay from Tallahassee to start a new chapter in her life, taking a position at the town's small primary school. Friends described her as calm, patient, and endlessly giving. She loved reading by the sea, baking small loaves of banana bread for her students, and spending weekends helping at the local library's reading club. That June, the school year ended, and Anna planned to spend her summer exploring nearby trails and painting seascapes. She lived alone in a small cottage on Driftwood Lane, surrounded by flowering jasmine and seashells she had collected from her walks. Her neighbors often saw her watering plants early in the morning, always offering a polite wave before heading to her car. The weekend of June 15th began like any other. The weather was mild and the air shimmered with warmth. Anna had mentioned to her friend Caroline Parks, the librarian, that she planned to visit a coastal art market about an hour north. She wanted to buy new brushes and canvas paper. She left home that Saturday morning around 9 o'clock, wearing a light blue sundress and carrying her woven beach bag. Caroline remembered her saying, "I'll be back by evening. Save me a seat at the library event." But Anna never returned. That evening, Caroline waited at the small library hall as chairs filled for the summer reading celebration. When Anna didn't appear, she assumed the trip had run late. Yet by the time night settled, unease began to ripple quietly through the small community. The next morning, Anna's car was found parked near a quiet coastal road about 15 miles from town. The windows were rolled down, the driver's door unlocked. Inside were her sketchpad, a small thermos, and her reading glasses folded neatly on the passenger seat. There were no signs of distress, only stillness, as if she had stepped away for a moment and never returned. Local officers arrived quickly, joined by volunteers from town. They combed nearby dunes and mangroves, calling her name, scanning for footprints or fabric caught in branches. Search parties worked through the day and into the evening, guided by flashlights that flickered softly against the sand. Reporters from nearby cities arrived by midweek, their cameras capturing scenes of community members walking side by side with lanterns and maps. The story of the missing young teacher from Crystal Bay spread across the region, touching hearts beyond the town's borders. Days became weeks. Despite every effort, Anna was not found. The local sheriff, Frank Delaney, remained steady in his commitment, coordinating divers, helicopters, and mounted patrols. He told the community, "We keep hope until we have an answer." Caroline continued visiting Anna's home to care for her garden. She placed fresh flowers by the front door each week, never letting the place feel forgotten. Students at the elementary school drew pictures of their teacher, surrounded by sunshine and seashells, and those drawings covered the classroom walls. By late summer, when the investigation slowed, the case remained open but unsolved. The town carried on gently, yet her name stayed present, spoken with care in conversations at cafes, church gatherings, and evening walks. In 1975, as technology of that era allowed, officers continued reviewing tips and interviewing travelers who might have passed through the area that day. A few said they remembered seeing a light blue car parked by the dunes, but nothing more. Without clear evidence, the case settled into silence. The years that followed brought change to Crystal Bay. New roads replaced sandpaths, small shops grew into family-owned businesses, and a new generation of residents filled the town. But for those who remembered the summer of 1974, the image of Anna's empty car remained etched in memory. Caroline, who eventually became head librarian, never let the story fade. She organized an annual reading drive in Anna's name, calling it the Carver Promise, to encourage students to cherish learning the way Anna had inspired them to. By the 1990s, advances in evidence storage began to help law enforcement revisit older cases. Many departments across Florida started digitizing records and preserving files with greater accuracy. In 1997, a newly assigned detective, James Colton, joined the Crystal Bay Police Department. Young but methodical, he believed that even old mysteries deserved a fresh look. James spent his early weeks studying unsolved files. Among them, the 1974 case stood out. The photographs, reports, and personal notes filled 3 thin folders, each one labeled Carver. Anna unresolved. He studied every page, the list of found items, the interview transcripts, the witness sketches. Something about the simple details caught his attention. The glasses neatly folded on the passenger seat, the untouched sketch pad, the location, isolated yet visible from the highway. He wondered if something had been missed. In 1998, with permission from the sheriff, James decided to re-examine the case. The original evidence box, sealed decades ago, was still intact. Inside were photographs, small personal items, and a fragment of fabric collected from brush near the coastal road. Back in the 70s, such materials offered limited information, but by the late 90s, laboratories could test trace materials with newer techniques. James contacted a forensic analyst in Tallahassee who specialized in material analysis. They agreed to perform preliminary tests to determine if anything useful could be extracted. It was a slow process, requiring care due to the age of the samples. Meanwhile, James revisited people connected to the case. He found Caroline, now retired, living quietly near the edge of town. When he introduced himself and explained his purpose, she smiled softly and said, "I've waited a long time to hear someone say her name again." They spoke for hours about Anna's kindness, her routines, her love for her students, and that final morning. Caroline recalled that Anna always carried a small silver charm bracelet given to her by her mother. It wasn't found with her belongings. James noted the detail, a small clue lost to time but now significant. When the laboratory results returned months later, James read them carefully. A faint trace of biological material had been recovered from the fabric fragment. It wasn't enough to form a complete profile then, but it was enough to preserve for future testing. He ordered the material stored under new archival conditions, anticipating that one day technology might do more. He placed a note in the file, "Hold for future DNA advancement." As years rolled into decades, the case remained open, moving silently through time but never forgotten. Crystal Bay continued to grow, though its heart stayed gentle. Tourists came and went, unaware of the quiet story resting beneath the rhythm of waves. Then, in 2019, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement launched a statewide initiative to re-examine unsolved cases from the past 5 decades using modern forensic tools. When the list reached Crystal Bay, Detective Rachel Monroe, who now headed the Cold Case Division, recognized the name immediately: Anna Carver. Rachel, thoughtful and precise, believed that even the smallest clue could lead to understanding. She ordered the preserved sample from 1998 to be transferred to a specialized lab in Orlando, equipped with next-generation sequencing technology. She didn't promise instant results, but she promised effort. When the lab began testing, it used techniques that didn't exist even 5 years earlier. Machines capable of reading and matching degraded genetic material worked quietly over several weeks. Data appeared slowly, line by line, until one evening an analyst called Rachel. "We got a viable sequence," the voice said, "and it matches someone in the database. Not a direct entry, but a familial link." Rachel leaned forward at her desk, heart steady but alert. After 45 years, the first real connection had surfaced. The match led to a family residing in Central Florida, descendants of someone who had once worked in Crystal Bay during the 1970s. a man named Peter Latham, whose employment records placed him in the area exactly when Anna vanished. Rachel began reviewing employment logs, property listings and archived maps, tracing every movement connected to Peter's name. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. For the first time since 1974, the quiet file marked unresolved began to glow with possibility again. Detective Rachel Monroe carefully reviewed every piece of the original file. She traced Peter Latham's life in the 1970s, a young man working as a maintenance assistant for a small coastal resort, just a few miles from where Anna's car had been found. He lived with his parents in a modest home near the edge of town. Rachel reached out to surviving co-workers and neighbors from that era. Some recalled Peter as quiet and polite, always working diligently, never drawing attention to himself. Others remembered him helping with small-town events, setting up chairs, cleaning public spaces, and assisting with local festivals. There was nothing remarkable or concerning, only a record of a young man living an ordinary life. But the DNA match was undeniable. While Peter had never been entered into a criminal database, familial genetic information had connected him to the trace material found on the fabric fragment collected from the coastal road. The evidence suggested a clear link to Anna's last known movements. Rachel approached the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Cold Case Unit to coordinate a careful, discreet investigation. They confirmed Peter's current residence, a small home in Gainesville, Florida. He had lived there peacefully for decades, raising a family, working as a technician for a public utility company. No one suspected him of any wrongdoing. Before proceeding, Rachel wanted to establish a full timeline of Peter's life in Crystal Bay. She obtained old employment records, checked utility logs, and interviewed those who had remained in town. The more detail she gathered, the clearer the picture became. Peter had been in the area during the summer of 1974. Coinciding with Anna's disappearance, she also revisited witnesses from the original case. Caroline Parks, the librarian, remembered that Anna had mentioned seeing someone around the art market near the pier, a man she had only briefly noticed. At the time it seemed insignificant, a passing observation. But now, with the connection to Peter, Rachel saw it in a new light. With the framework of the case established, Rachel obtained permission to collect a DNA sample from Peter. Her team used careful procedures. A swab from a coffee cup Peter had left outside his home, ensuring everything was documented for court admissibility. Within days, the lab confirmed the match. Peter Latham's DNA matched the trace material linked to Anna Carver. Rachel knew this was only part of the story. The DNA established connection, but did not explain the circumstances. She began working through other forms of evidence. Peter's old apartment keys, his work logs, and interviews with family members who recalled his frequent trips to the coast in the summer of 1974. Among Peter's personal effects, investigators found a small sketchbook, long forgotten, tucked in a closet. It contained faint pencil drawings of the Crystal Bay coastline, familiar dunes, the pier, the winding roads. One sketch depicted a small figure by a parked car along a secluded path. The detail was subtle, almost indistinguishable at first glance, but with careful review, the team realized it mirrored the location where Anna's car had been discovered. Rachel and her colleagues cross-referenced these findings with old photographs from the police archives. The sketches aligned perfectly with images of the coastal road and surrounding landscape. The combination of DNA, location mapping, and preserved evidence provided a compelling account of Anna's movements on the day she disappeared. Peter Latham was contacted for a formal interview. He agreed to cooperate, accompanied by his attorney. During questioning, he acknowledged being near the coastal road on the day Anna vanished. He described it as an ordinary drive, maintaining that he had not spoken with her. Yet the evidence, the DNA and sketches, suggested a direct connection. Throughout the investigation, Rachel emphasized professionalism and care. Every step was documented meticulously. She ensured the community understood that the process focused on uncovering facts, not speculation. Her approach earned quiet respect from Peter's family and the local residents who remembered Anna. While the formal proceedings were prepared, Rachel arranged for Anna's family to receive updates. Lillian Carver and her husband Howard had lived decades with quiet hope. When Rachel called to explain the DNA match and investigative progress, Lillian's voice trembled, not with fear but with relief. "Finally," she said softly, "we can understand what happened to our daughter." The case transitioned to the district attorney's office, where prosecutors reviewed every detail. With evidence spanning DNA, preserved material, sketches, and verified timelines, they concluded that a formal arrest and charges could be pursued. In mid-2020, Peter Latham was arrested at his home in Gainesville. The process was calm and respectful. Officers explained the purpose of the arrest: to answer questions regarding the 1974 disappearance of Anna Carver. Peter complied fully, showing quiet composure, and was escorted to the local courthouse. Neighbors observed the proceedings with curiosity and respect, unaware of the full history spanning nearly half a century. The announcement reverberated gently through the state. News outlets reported the resolution of a 46-year-old case, focusing on the perseverance of law enforcement, the advancements of modern forensics, and the care taken to preserve and review evidence over decades. Community members reflected on the impact Anna had made in her short time in Crystal Bay, and the way persistence had brought clarity to her story. During preliminary court hearings, the prosecution presented DNA evidence, sketches, and archival documents. Every detail was methodically explained, illustrating the sequence of events and reinforcing the credibility of findings. Forensic analysts described the process by which trace material had been preserved, eventually linked to Peter Latham, and confirmed through modern testing. Peter's defense focused on his current life and contributions to the community, emphasizing that his conduct over the past decades had been exemplary. The court treated all information with fairness, ensuring that every detail was weighed carefully. Outside the courthouse, Lillian Carver and Caroline Parks walked quietly along the courthouse steps. The wind carried the gentle scent of the nearby bay, mingling with the faint fragrance of jasmine. They spoke softly about Anna's love for teaching, her laughter at the library, and the simple joy she brought to children and neighbors. This reflection was not sorrowful but reflective, highlighting the positive impact Anna had left behind. With formal charges proceeding, the courtroom sessions progressed steadily. Witnesses recounted Anna's routines, the small community connections, and her kindness. The DNA evidence was detailed and explained thoroughly, giving clarity to long-standing questions. Archival photographs, carefully preserved, helped contextualize the scene of her last known movements. Community members attended the trial with quiet anticipation. Their presence was not for spectacle, but to honor the memory of a teacher who had touched the lives of so many. Families brought their children to understand that care, patience, and dedication could bridge decades of uncertainty. By the final week of proceedings, the narrative of events was complete. The courtroom remained orderly, focused on facts, timelines, and evidence. Every participant, from forensic specialists to family members, contributed to a full understanding of the case. As deliberations began, the air outside the courthouse was warm with late spring sunlight. Townspeople lingered along the sidewalks, reflecting on the years that had passed, the resilience of those who never stopped hoping, and the quiet triumph of truth revealed. Within days, the jury returned. The verdict confirmed that Peter Latham had a direct connection to Anna Carver's disappearance, as established through DNA evidence and corroborated documentation. The courtroom remained respectful, absorbing the conclusion with calm acknowledgement. Rachel Monroe exhaled softly, her hands resting on the edge of the table. She wasn't celebrating. She was honoring decades of careful investigation and the quiet persistence that had made this resolution possible. Outside, the community gathered at the beach where Anna had often walked. Friends, neighbors, and family released white balloons into the air. They drifted slowly above the ocean, catching sunlight, moving gently with the wind. A visual tribute to a life remembered and a story completed. Lillian Carver smiled softly as she held her husband's hand. Caroline stood nearby, her eyes reflecting quiet gratitude. Together they acknowledged the power of time, care, and attention to detail. The story of Anna Carver was no longer unfinished. It had taken decades. Yet the resolution brought calm reflection and light to a town that had carried her memory carefully through generations. The months following Peter Latham's arrest moved steadily, measured by careful steps and thorough preparation. The district attorney's office coordinated closely with Detective Rachel Monroe and forensic analysts to ensure every element of the decades-old case was documented and explained. Every piece of evidence, the fabric fragment, the sketches, the preserved DNA, was re-examined and confirmed for court presentation. The courtroom, when it opened in late 2020, carried a calm, purposeful atmosphere. Residents from Crystal Bay attended quietly, alongside members of Anna Carver's extended family. They wore soft colors, reflecting the gentle nature of the day, carrying flowers, photographs, and letters written in Anna's memory. Prosecutors presented the sequence of events meticulously. They detailed Anna's last known movements, the drive to the art market, her observed presence near the pier, and the location of her abandoned car. They explained how preserved items had yielded trace biological material decades later, which was ultimately matched to Peter Latham through modern DNA analysis and genealogical connections. The courtroom listened as Rachel Monroe described the forensic process. She spoke of care, preservation, and patience, how decades-old evidence, when treated respectfully, can reveal truth long after events have passed. She emphasized that this was not about blame for its own sake, but about clarity, understanding, and resolution for a family and a community that had waited patiently. Peter's defense team presented his current life with fairness, noting his contributions to the community, his stable career, and the positive example he had set over decades. The court treated these details with respect, weighing them alongside the established evidence. Every procedural step was followed, ensuring integrity, transparency, and fairness. During testimony, Caroline Parks recounted her memories of Anna with warmth and precision. She described quiet mornings in the library, afternoons spent reading together, and the way Anna's smile brought calm to children and adults alike. Each recollection was met with gentle nods from those in attendance, highlighting the deep impact Anna had left on the community. Friends and neighbors shared reflections of the summer of 1974, a season of sunshine, laughter, and simple routines, underscoring the contrast between the ordinary world Anna had lived in and the uncertainty her disappearance had caused. These accounts did not dwell on hardship, but instead illuminated the enduring light of her character. The final days of the trial were measured and respectful. Forensic experts confirmed the DNA results and the sketch analysis. Archival photographs were presented, showing the coastal road, dunes, and landmarks Anna had encountered on her last day. Each piece reinforced the connection to Peter Latham without sensationalism, focusing instead on clarity and understanding. After careful deliberation, the jury returned their verdict. The courtroom remained calm as the foreperson announced that Peter Latham was directly connected to Anna Carver's disappearance, as verified through the forensic evidence and corroborating details. There was no outburst, no spectacle, only measured acknowledgement of truth and resolution. Outside the courthouse, a gentle breeze carried the scent of the nearby ocean. Residents lingered quietly, reflecting on the years that had passed and the way patience, care, and scientific advancement had brought clarity. Families who had grown up hearing about Anna's story now understood that her life had been honored through persistence and respect for facts. Rachel Monroe stepped outside, the late afternoon sunlight soft against her face. She walked to the edge of the courthouse grounds and breathed in the warm, salt-tinged air. For decades, she had dedicated herself to uncovering truths that had waited patiently. Now, standing among the community she had served, she felt the quiet fulfillment of work completed with integrity. In Crystal Bay, the townspeople gathered at the beach where Anna had once walked, a place she had loved for its calm and simplicity. White balloons were released into the sky, drifting gracefully over the water. Each balloon symbolized remembrance, hope, and continuity, a visual representation of how one life can touch countless others. Lillian Carver held her husband's hand tightly, the wind lifting strands of hair across her face. She smiled softly as she watched the balloons rise. "Finally," she whispered, "we have clarity. We have her story." Caroline Park, standing nearby, nodded. She had carried Anna's memory through decades, ensuring it was never forgotten. "She guided us all," Caroline said gently, "through kindness, patience, and care. Today that guidance comes full circle." Months later, a permanent plaque was installed at the local library in Anna's honor. It read, "In memory of Anna Carver, a teacher, a friend, and a light that endures beyond time. Her story reminds us that truth, care, and patience can illuminate even the longest shadows." Visitors often paused, placing flowers or quietly reflecting. Children in particular were drawn to the library walls, reading about a woman who had nurtured learning, patience, and community spirit. The plaque was not a symbol of loss, but a celebration of a life well lived and remembered. Crystal Bay continued to thrive, but the memory of Anna Carver was now woven gently into the town's identity. Teachers, librarians, and residents spoke of her example, emphasizing kindness, perseverance, and the importance of caring for one another. In law enforcement circles, the case became part of a training program for cold cases, illustrating how patience, evolving technology, and meticulous preservation of evidence can bring clarity to events that once seemed unreachable. Rachel Monroe shared her experience, emphasizing respect, precision, and the careful nurturing of facts. Years later, when new detectives accessed the digital archives, they found Anna Carver's case marked as Resolved 2020. Next to it was a note Rachel had written, "Preserve patience, preserve kindness. Truth will find its way." For Crystal Bay, the story of Anna Carver became a testament to the enduring impact of one life, the quiet strength of a community, and the remarkable power of persistence over time. The town had waited decades for resolution, and now clarity had arrived, gentle, respectful, and complete. Even generations later, students at the local elementary school would hear her story. They learned about care, patience, and the pursuit of truth. And each child who walked along the same coastal path Anna once did could imagine her smiling by the dunes, a quiet presence guiding those who followed in her steps. In this way, Anna Carver's life, remembered and honored, became timeless. Her story, once paused by uncertainty, had reached a gentle conclusion. Proof that truth, when sought with care and perseverance, shines quietly but unmistakably, no matter how long the wait.